further delay, I shall pass you over to Michael.
Good afternoon, Richard. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm looking through some of the notes here, and yes, I agree, Julian. Richard has far too many emails. He must start actually filing them away, which is always a good thing to do. I've taken over the microphones, different voice, so it would be just useful if you could let me know whether you're hearing me loud and clear in the chat box. That would be really great as we go through the first few slides, and if we need to talk up, or if I'm talking too loudly, then I can calm it down a little bit. I'm from Yorkshire, so I do have a little bit of a Yorkshire accent. If I say anything too quickly or you can't understand it, then please stop me in the chat box and I will repeat it and say it a bit slower. But thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be looking at using employee volunteering as an employee development tool. And this is something which I have been interested in for quite some time. But for those of you who don't know me, this is I've put my whole career onto what is called an infographic. I understand one slide full of pictures which I can talk to. If you haven't seen me before, the image on the right-hand side is a pretty good estimation of what I might look like in younger days. I started from Yorkshire. I've been in HR since 1981, member of the CIPD. I have got all the CIPD qualifications, and I've actually got the wrong logo on there. Somebody from the CIPD would doubtless remind me of that. Worked all over the world, and I've come back into the UK and worked with an organisation called Abacida. During that time, I've been a volunteer with the CIPD as a branch chair, a national council member, and various different other projects, including helping out with some research work that we're doing into volunteering. And the logos you see there, The Simpsons, Bloomberg, BBC, worked with The Simpsons to create learning resources which use the characters from The Simpsons, worked with Bloomberg to create learning resources from their news channels and all the various different Abacida brands there. If you want to find out any more about me, you can go to michaelmillward.co.uk. If you go to michaelmillward.com, you'll go to an American lawyer, but michaelmillward.com and you can find out all about me. Right, what are we going to look at? Well, we're going to look at employee volunteering and how it can be used for development, and why am I interested? It's an interest which started a long time ago. Back in the 90s, I was working for a technology company. I had to convert technicians into marketeers because that is one of the career routes that they had within that organization. You become a technical person, and then as you progress, you move up into marketing and product development. And I needed to train those people how to be marketeers. So I would send them off to very expensive training courses in with very expensive organizations in nice stately homes, and they would come back all fully skilled up. But the training that I had to provide them with had to happen in time with the calendar of courses offered by that particular trainer. But they didn't always fit in with the cycle that we had within the business. So I was left with people who were either basically going to use it or lose it. So how did I maintain their skills? What can I do to actually mean that you've been aware on this expensive course? There's now 3 or 4 months before you're actually going to use those skills and knowledge. How do I make sure that you don't lose it? And I suggested that people go and work with local charities as a volunteer to create marketing plans for them so that they wouldn't lose the knowledge that they had gained. It would still be fresh and they could actually think things through. I faced a huge amount of resistance to that. People did not want to do it. They did not want to volunteer. They didn't see it as relevant. They didn't see it as important. I'm here to make money. Why are you sending me off to be a volunteer? I don't have the time. It doesn't fit in with this. It doesn't fit in with that. All these sorts of things. So it didn't work particularly well. One thing that I have noticed over the time since then is that employees are becoming much more interested in volunteering and doing it in a way that is coordinated by their employer. So I thought then about the history of the ways in which people volunteer and how it's developed. And in many ways, it has started off as mainly focused on public relations, something that we can get in the local paper, in our company brochure, in the annual report, something which says that we're doing our bit for corporate social responsibility. And increasingly that is becoming more important. We've seen so many different organizations get roasted by the press over their employment conditions. Sports Direct is just one. We've seen organizations get into trouble over their employment cultures, including big banks like Barclays, who've now launched their Life Skills campaign. And these are coming through again and again. Organizations want to be seen to be doing things within their community. It's also an emerging trend in employee development. I have spoken to employers who've said, yes, we do take into account the volunteering that people do when we're talking about promotions and recruitment, but it's not widespread. It's still very much in the background as something that some people do and something that others don't really get involved in. But what we are finding as well, when we talk to graduates and people who are looking for jobs, it is school leavers as well as graduates, is that they're looking at what the organization that they're going to work for does in the community. It's increasingly important. What does working for you say about me as an individual? It gets people much more going, much more motivated and much more engaged with their organization. So this has been an ongoing research project over many years. It started formally about 10 years ago with business in the community. Been looking at it on and off ever since then. So where are we now with the research? Well, volunteering as an employee development tool is never really going to be more than one of the training options that you have available. You should not rely upon it, but it should not become the only thing you do, and it should not become something that you don't do. But we're realizing now that it's not particularly well understood by either the voluntary organizations, the employers, or the employees. It's not put into a context. But we are seeing that it will work for any type of learning need, but it has to be planned. You can't simply send someone away to do some volunteering without positioning that volunteering as a development opportunity and also reviewing it with people once they've returned. It's the reflection on the volunteering experience that brings out the learning from that experience, not just the fact that it's taken place. And in many ways, we're seeing the lack of coaching and mentoring skills in organizations as a reason why people are not seeing the full benefit from development terms of the volunteering that their employees do. You have to make sure that it fits within a wider context. We're also seeing that it can be good for team development, but not necessarily for completely new teams. There seems to be something which tells us that a team needs to have some element of establishment, for want of a better word. They have to have been going for a little while, and then you can get into, okay, we're going to go and do some volunteering. But again, you need to then reflect with people and go back, okay, using a Belbin models or one of the models of teamwork, and pull out from the experience where people saw the different aspects of teamwork developing. Otherwise, it's just a nice day out, and you ended up getting wet, getting cold, having some fun, ending up in the pub, and you'll have some nice stories to tell, rather than it being about the actual development. The other thing that we also have to think is it's not universal. It does not work for everyone. There is a cultural or an attitude aspect to volunteering which you need to have bought into in order to then benefit from volunteering. You cannot force someone to learn. You cannot force someone to volunteer. You end up with somebody standing there, being there but not actually being there, not being present, not contributing to it, making up their mind that they're not going to benefit from it at all, and that's it. You have to have already got people bought into the idea of volunteering, and that's why it has to be part, I think, of the culture of the organization. It's all about relationships in many ways. There are three parts to the relationship which make for a successful volunteering learning experience. The first one is the employer, the second, the employee, and we must build into it the host voluntary organization. Oops, sorry. I have closed. I have just to make Richard feel good there, I pressed the wrong button deliberately. He says, don't worry, Richard, don't worry. We're all in control. A three-way relationship in which every part has their own objectives. Now, having your own objective, is important that these objectives are shared. and that they're equally understood, equally appreciated, equally valued. We all know what it is we aim to get from this experience. We all know what we're going to do in order to try and achieve it. We know what we're going to do if it goes wrong. Right? How will we deal with things that we're not happy with? So they don't have to be the same objectives, but they do need to have some sort of synchronicity, need to be in sync in some ways. But I've spoken to numerous employers who've said, well, it's volunteering. You know, we do it for the good of our souls, where it's a way of giving back. And I've spoken to voluntary organizations who say, actually, we don't want it to be about giving back. We want it to be about us giving you something which you pay us money for, which we then use for something else. Right? But the volunteering, the contribution that you're making is valued. But one of the things we're seeing is this mismatch between how the volunteering is viewed. It's a business transaction in many ways. It's not an act of charity. And you have to treat the volunteering as a learning experience as the same way as you would in buying training from a commercial training organization or a college. You want to see results. There's no point in saying, we didn't get any results out of this, but we did help a lot of people. Right? You're not going to go back and try and help those people again unless your business can be shown some type of benefit. And if you're funding this from your training budget, that has to be a learning objective that's been fulfilled. Now, getting the employees involved is one of the important aspects. Right? How do we go about doing that? Well, I've already said volunteering is an extremely personal experience. It's something that you make a decision to do. When we look at the fundraising that employees do, whether it's a sponsored walk or it's baking cakes or whatever it is, people tend to support charities which have had an impact on their life or the lives of people that are close to them, people that they care about. So I walked the Yorkshire Three Peaks earlier this year and raised over £100 because one of my friends, he had a daughter in November. She'd been due in January, so she's very premature. She spends a lot of time in an incubator in a special care baby unit. So we did the Three Peaks to raise some money for the special care baby units. It's not something I would have done. The Three Peaks, it's hard work, right? But it's not something I would have done if I had not had a friend who had been in that situation. That's what I mean about it being extremely personal. We then also need to think about employees may already be volunteering and you don't know about it. You need to ask yourself why, but collect the information about why it is that they're volunteering, what it is that they're doing, and maybe you can pull skills and knowledge they're gaining from that into the workplace. Do you know enough about what your employees do in their communities, the roles that they play? It's very often the person who you wouldn't think of as a leader within your organization might actually be a leader within your community and something that you can actually benefit from as a result of that. So you capitalize on their existing activities. But if you are going to ask people to volunteer, or they may be volunteering already, you need to make sure that you link that there's a clear link to their personal development needs that you've identified and agreed with them. No point in just saying, you've got to do this. It's not what it's about. It's about saying, okay, you need to learn in order to progress or need to learn in order to be better at your job. This is one of the ways in which we can do it. Make it an option for people. But it is important to treat it like any other learning activity. And most important with any learning activity, I think, is that you do celebrate the successes that people achieve. You do get them in the local paper. You do get them into the company reports. You celebrate what people are doing as a way of then encouraging other people to do things. But it's only when we reflect on things that we really learn from them. And if you've done something good, having the recognition means that you're more likely to repeat that activity and to learn from it. So if we can get that with employees' involvement, it's all about building a personal bond and communicating with people. But what is it that the employer commitment has to be? Well, one of the things is people will assume that volunteering is going to be free, and it can very well be free, but effective volunteering as a learning activity very often needs a lot of research, a lot of working with the voluntary organization. So though it might cost less than a training course in a conventional provider, it's not going to be completely free, and it won't happen as quickly. I've heard reports of charities having telephone calls from large corporations saying, we've got 15 people who need to have a day's volunteering before the end of our financial year, which is in 2 weeks' time. What can you give them to do next Tuesday? Right? there can be all sorts of hoops that need to be gone through, all sorts of legislation that needs to be dealt with before somebody can go into a volunteering type situation. That's all to do with the protection of vulnerable people. Right? Now, we need, as employers, to understand the voluntary sector much better. Right? We need to support and to integrate with the host organization more, and that may mean partnering with one organization rather than lots of different organizations. Right? We need to understand that people make sure that the host organization know what they want to achieve and that your employee can help them achieve it. Just having somebody turn up who's used to sitting behind a desk 5 days a week and put them into a farm, for example, or a garden, or some old people's homes, may mean that they're completely out of their water, and you need to prepare them for that environment before they can go into it. Right? But treat the host organization like a learning provider. It's great they're a charity. It's great they're doing things with limited resources. It's great that you want to help them. Great that you want to contribute to something. But actually, they're providing you with a service. You will exchange employee time. You will exchange time or perhaps money in order to get it all organized, especially if you're using some type of middle operation, some type of agency. Then you need to make sure you get a return on that. And it's only, I suppose, what I'm saying, is you need to understand, put the commitment into understanding the needs of the voluntary organization you're going to be working with. But then we come on to the host organization. Right? And essentially, that is almost where employers don't understand host organizations very well, and the voluntary sector doesn't quite understand the commercial sector very well. But both have a lot to learn from each other. And when you talk to managers in voluntary sector organizations, they do an awful lot with very little. And the commercial organizations could benefit an awful lot from that knowledge. But what we need to do is make sure that your employees participate in activities that are linked to specific SMART or MUST objectives of the host organization. It has something that is going to pay back into the host organization as well as to themselves and their employer. Right? You need to have a manager within the host organization who's going to be your liaison between that organization, your employees, and you as the employer. Somebody who's going to be responsible for making sure that your objectives and their objectives are met. Right? And you also need to think about the rules about what they must not do. And this is where you get into the vulnerable children, vulnerable adults type of scenario. There are lots of things in lots of organizations that look very straightforward, but they're covered by a lot of legislation. So don't get involved in things which then may create problems back in the workplace. Some charities will require everyone to have a criminal record check. That could cause some problems if your employees haven't told you about their criminal record. But make sure that you have regular contact with the host organization and hold regular reviews of progress in much the same way as you would with a commercial provider. Don't assume just because it's a charity that you should accept anything less than what you would expect from any other organization. If you do, it's a waste of time. You'll end up disadvantaging yourself, the employees, and the host organization. Now, I mentioned that there are organizations that will organize volunteering. Some of them do it as their only activity, some of them do it on a profit basis, and some of them do it on a not-for-profit basis. But it is a nice, straightforward way of identifying the right types of organizations to work with and making sure that what they do matches what you do and vice versa. Right? So you can do it yourself. It's low cost. Well, there isn't any invoice to pay, but it can take hours, days, weeks, months to get it right. And sometimes it is much better to find yourself an expert and trust them, because it is a very specialized matching process. If putting somebody into what is an alien environment can be very stressful. And when I'm talking to people who have done volunteering, one of the phrases that I hear more often than any other is, I would never normally, under any other circumstances, have accessed these types of people. I would never have been in this situation. I drive past these people as I drive into work, but I would never have thought of getting out of the car. The volunteering put me into parts of this place, the city where I work, that I would never actually gain access to in any other way. And some people respond very well, others don't respond quite so well. It is too much of a cultural shock for them. So You have to use introduction facilitators. These agencies may charge you money. Some of it is just to cover their costs, and some of them are run on a much more commercial basis. It's about, with any other supplier, making sure that they work for the one with you. But I would suggest that they're still cheaper than traditional training, although you might have to take a little while longer to make it happen, and you will have to spend time on the coaching and mentoring to bring the learning out from the volunteering experience. So, so the things that we're starting to find at the moment, I called them conclusions at the beginning. The more I look into it, the more I think that they just create more avenues to look into this, to learn more about it. So what is the future going to be? Well, first of all, I think the use of volunteering by organizations will increase as we become a more caring and sharing society. More of the things that we have relied upon central and local government to provide are not going to be provided. We simply do not have the money coming in tax revenue. Simple statement. Right? So more charities will be funding things. The big lottery fund has funded Team GB and the Paralympics team as well, and you've seen the commercials about that. They are also funding an awful lot of social care projects as well, and environmental projects. And we will see much more of those sorts of things, and many more organizations and individuals being more philanthropic. Bad pause for that one. But I'm so pleased I got it right. Right? So we'll see much more of that. We'll see many more charities and not-for-profit organizations becoming providers of social services, and they will become more commercial. I predict at the moment that it will not be long before charities start charging for the opportunity to use volunteering as an employee development tool. And I think as an HR person, that is one of the things that we need to investigate much more. We need to understand the way in which they do that, but it will not be long before they start charging for the opportunity to volunteer as an employee development tool. But employers also need to understand the voluntary sector better, and the volunteering sector need to understand the commercial sector better. And if they don't, it won't be successful. But the ones that actually make that level of understanding will find that those are the ones which have the strength to make these relationships and the experience work. And that's the next stage of the research that we're going to be looking into, is like, how do we make that work? How do we bring volunteering organizations and employers in the commercial sector or government sectors together and build a level of understanding where each can contribute to the growth of the other and have a meaningful relationship? So, Richard told me about half an hour, and I think we've just about done that. If you are interested in getting involved in the research, if you've got any experiences, then these are my contact details. You can do that. That would be great. That would be brilliant. And thank you very much for the message, Shirley. We'll deal with that. But if anyone has any questions, that would be really great.